What's going on, guys? Today we're going to go over some earnings. Obviously, it's a huge week in the market this week, and I want to go over and discuss kind of what's been happening with the earnings and then also what I see for the next couple days. We have some big earnings coming up tomorrow. We have Apple actually announcing earnings after the close, so there's a lot of things going on, and it's going to have a huge effect basically on the market overall, especially over the next kind of quarter, just being able to look back at these earnings and see how companies are guiding kind of going forward. So I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, make sure you drop a like down below. And if you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you hit that sub button. So starting off here, we're looking at the broader market, right? So we could see the SPY here and kind of how everything's reacting. So right now we're looking at the last 5 days. And obviously the end of last week, we had this huge rundown. So into Monday, right, we saw a lot of volatility, kind of the market go down at first over the first kind of half of the day and then spike back up at the end of the day. Really no major earnings were announced on Monday, which is very interesting. We'll kind of get into the companies that announced across the days so far and then into the Thursday and Friday as well. But then into Tuesday, we kind of saw almost a very similar trend. We started off and kind of just sunk down and then bounced back up. And then today was a little bit different. We saw kind of everything spike up at the start of the day and then sink back down. So it's been a very weird day, where almost a tale of two halves of the day, where either the start of the day is very red or the start of the day is very positive, and then the second half of the day is basically the opposite, or even the close of the day, the last hour of the day. But basically we're seeing two different sides of the market just every day, where you're seeing a huge run up in the start and then a huge run down at the end of the day. So it's just a very interesting, very weird kind of thing that's going on. Like, it's just kind of battling with itself, trying to decide where it wants to go. So overall, on Monday, so this is Monday, January 24th, we didn't really have anything major. You can see here the market caps of the companies that basically announced earnings on Monday, and we didn't even have anyone over $100 billion market cap. So right now, right, IBM is in here, and basically they announced the earnings. There was a surprise of minus 1.18%. So basically in line with earnings, nothing crazy here. You can see the consensus was around 3.39, and they actually came in at 3.35. The rest of these companies, relatively not a big deal. I mean, you have some $50 billion and $28 billion, $25 billion market caps, but no kind of very common names in here in this list, and no one who would have a huge effect on the market. Tuesday, we actually start seeing a difference in here. So Tuesday, January 25th, right, we had a lot of big names. So you have Microsoft here, you have J&J, Johnson & Johnson, Verizon, Texas Instruments, NextEra Energy. I've actually owned some of their stock at one point in time. Raytheon Technologies, they produce a lot of basically systems for aircrafts. Lockheed Martin, 3M, General Electric, all these companies, right, announced, and they're all over $100 billion. You even have obviously Microsoft sitting at 2.1 trillion. And if you really dig into it and kind of look at these earnings, right, this is what I'm most interested in. So what is the surprise, right? And surprise kind of can be neither here nor there, depending on how other factors go within kind of a conference call. But overall, if you're looking at this category, right, we have 8%. There was a positive 8% surprise from Microsoft. So Microsoft beat their earnings, right? They announced $2.48 compared to a consensus of $2.29. So that's an 8% beat. You're seeing here just a 0.5% from J&J. That's nothing crazy. Verizon, relatively stable business. They beat by 2%, which we'll see. AT&T was very similar, announcing today around 2% beat. Texas Instruments, this one is very interesting. So they do kind of a lot of kind of different things. They produce, obviously, if you remember from school, you'd have a Texas Instruments calculator, but they also are in kind of a number of other industries, and they have a lot of kind of interesting growth vectors kind of going forward. But they had a surprise of 16.41%, which is very surprising, right? It's not like a bunch of people are going out purchasing calculators and whatever for their kids for Christmas, you know. So for a fourth quarter for a company like this, right, you're not seeing a lot of like retail growth or anything, but for them to beat by double digits and well over double digits, that's kind of surprising. All right, so they announced a $2.27 compared to a consensus of $1.95. And then again, you got 2.5% here from NextEra Energy. That's just an oil and gas company, basically. Raytheon, as we explained, a lot of Aviation industry, they had a small beat there. Here, American Express, so obviously they have credit cards and whatnot, but they had a 22, almost in a 0.5% beat, which is crazy because the payment industry has been beaten down. If you look at any of the companies like Verizon, what is it, PayPal is another big one, they've all kind of had a huge rundown in the market. And for American Express to come in and basically beat on all their earnings, that is massive. And I think overall, right, Visa, I believe they announced either Thursday or Friday, I would look for them to probably have a similar beat. And the real question will be, right, PayPal's been beaten down. We'll kind of take a look later at that stock and see how that one's kind of reacted to this news, because they all will kind of feed off each other and react in different ways. Other than that, Lockheed Martin, we wouldn't really expect a big beat from there. Obviously, travel is still kind of beaten down. And then here, 3M company. So 3M, they produce a lot of kind of consumer type goods. And for them to beat by 13%, like I think that's basically massive, right? Because even inflation, just looking at inflation year over year, right, you'd expect them to be up 7.5%, depending on kind of how inflation numbers work out, but we're kind of sitting around that 7 mark. And they're kind of even surprising analysts at 13.79%. And a lot of these kind of consensuses, right, they were put in and they're kind of determined over time, but a lot of them are put in kind of before we've seen some of this weakness. So it's very interesting that right, even these companies are beating when things were a little more positive than the negativity that you're seeing in the market right now. So, and then you got GE in here, which is still underperforming, but what's the surprise there? You know, GE's kind of had a struggle over the last few years, and they're starting to turn it around, and overall we'll see if they can kind of do that, but they're still trying to find their footing underneath them and work things out. So then here we have the companies that are releasing earnings today. So I'll be releasing this video at night, so a lot of these earnings will have already occurred, and actually we're going to get into some of them in this video, but obviously there's others that might still be announcing earnings. But right now you're going to see kind of Tesla is announcing, Abbott Laboratories, Intel, and AT&T. The biggest ones that I'm kind of looking at, Abbott is relatively, it's not a big player in the market. It still has a $200 billion market cap, which is still massive. But in terms of, right, a lot of the weakness that we've seen in the market, it's been a lot more focused around tech. So Tesla is a good example of that, and Intel. And then AT&T is kind of more a commodities base, so it's not a huge tell, but it kind of gives you an idea, right, of where the market's at. You also have ADP, that's another big one that people are often familiar with, but really those are the kind of the main ones today. So let's jump in real quick and look at some of these companies that actually have announced here in the last kind of few hours. I don't want to go too far into earnings on any individual company, because you could make a whole individual video on it, and that would turn into hours and hours of a video. But basically here we have Tesla. So they announced their earnings, as you saw, after kind of the market closed, and they announced actually an earnings, their expected was $2.38, and they actually reported earnings of $2.54. This is a surprise of almost 7%, so 6.88% on EPS, which is actually very, very low compared to the beats that they've had over the last kind of 3 quarters. So they had last quarter 15%, the Q2 48%, and then Q1 of 19%. So overall, it's still they're still trending in the right direction, right? But investors have kind of come to expect, right, double-digit beats on a lot of these items. So it is kind of a surprise to the downside. I mean, Tesla's still down, and it's kind of suffered from relative weakness and weakness in the market. But overall, right, you're not seeing, I don't think this is really going to change a whole lot of the market's perception. It's still kind of a negative perception around things. And then revenue, you did have a surprise of 6.5% almost, which is actually significant compared to what you've seen in the past. So in the past, it's been almost 0.5% here, by a beat of almost 0.5%. Beat of almost 5%, and then a beat of only kind of 1%. So they've actually done a good job of kind of increasing their revenue in this past quarter. But again, so far Tesla hasn't really reacted too well today. The chart kind of is not really saying a whole lot. We'll jump over there just real quick, and you can kind of see here that today they really haven't done a whole lot after the market. It's almost like investors kind of expected bad news, and things reacted poorly kind of here towards the end of the day, and then even after hours when they were announcing, things kind of reacted to the downside, and then you've seen things kind of run back up. And again, I think that has to do with investor expectations, but also with the relative weakness in the market. Intel, as I mentioned, is another big company that was reporting today, and I couldn't even get their earnings on Google, so they're kind of relatively fresh, but we saw an EPS of $1.09 adjusted, and then basically the expectation consensus was only 91 cents. So that's a relatively large beat there that you're kind of seeing from Intel, which is huge. Again, Intel is a tech giant. They have a lot of kind of play in the industry that are doing cloud stuff and also producing computers and other things. So they have a large amount of kind of reach, but you also have a revenue here of $19.5 billion adjusted versus an expected revenue of 18.31. So again, another huge beat there. You can kind of see that Intel said it expected 18.3 billion in adjusted sales in the first quarter of 2022, so beating the consensus of analyst expectations. So basically, even Intel is guiding higher for their expectations for 2022. So that is also a good sign, right? They don't see weakness in the market. They think that overall, right, that they're still going to be able to perform to a high level here. So that's overall a positive sign. But if we jump over here and actually take a look, even though they're saying these things, how are investors reacting? So on the day running up to earnings, they were actually up 1.35%. But as earnings kind of have elapsed over after hours, basically we've seen the stock run down back even further than it ran up throughout the day. So it's down 94 cents, 1.82%. So obviously investors kind of seeing something different. I wouldn't say that's a negative reaction, right? You could clearly have a much worse reaction than that from a company like Intel, where there's a lot of kind of nuances and volatility in the tech sector. So overall, I would say that's kind of relatively neutral of a kind of response. So as I mentioned earlier, American Express had a huge beat, which should in turn have an effect on PayPal and Visa stock. But here we're seeing, right, PayPal hasn't really had a huge reaction. Actually, on the 5-day, they're down 10%. But you can see that a lot of that has to do with the kind of the finish of last week. But even in the last day, we really haven't seen a huge change. They actually ran down into the end of the day, probably on kind of anticipation of kind of earnings and overall weakness again in the market, because we've kind of seen this similar trend where the last hour of the day today was kind of a bust for a lot of stocks where they just kind of fell through the floor. But after hours, it's kind of ran back up, making up for a little bit of those losses, but still overall not a very positive day. So it's interesting, right, that a stock like American Express can beat by 20%, over 20%, and you're seeing companies in similar industries like PayPal that are still down huge. And what's very interesting in this stock is, right, if we go back to 52-week highs, you can see, and you can see down here, right, $310. That's almost a double up on this stock price. So if PayPal were to even bounce back anywhere close to this number, you're seeing a huge return in this stock. So this is a company that I've been looking at potentially buying, but I think there's a lot of upside, and honestly I think it's getting very close to the bottom in my opinion. And then Visa is kind of another similar story. So it's down overall. It's less volatile than a PayPal stock, but in the last day, again, you see something kind of similar where they actually had bumped up before market, or kind of as market opened. So they were in a good position kind of all day, but again, towards the end of the day, around that kind of 2:30, 3 o'clock mark, we see it run down again. And overall, again, it's had a little positive spike after hours, but it's still down massively from its year 52-week high. So you can see 250, right? It's got a $50 kind of run up, or about 20%. So even Visa, which I think is a lot more stable play, a lot less risk associated with it, there's still a lot of upside in that stock. So two stocks that you could see Visa and you could see PayPal as they announce earnings. You could see them run up quite a bit if overall the market reacts positively. The last thing I wanted to discuss here is the earnings for tomorrow. So January 27th, Thursday, we have Apple, Visa, MasterCard, Comcast. I'm not going to pronounce this right, but this company, they produce, I believe, a lot of the kind of machinery, or sorry, they're a shipping company, and then McDonald's. So obviously a bunch of kind of massive companies in here that have kind of a wide range of things, right? You're looking at shipping. So shipping has been a huge factor over the last kind of couple of years with everything kind of going on in the shipping industry. You've got fast food, you have Comcast, which is kind of a very stable, relatively stable business. Visa, MasterCard, which we talked about Visa just there, and then Apple, obviously being the biggest company in the world. So right now, my expectations kind of going into these earnings is I think Apple is going to have a 7 to 10% beat. That's kind of at least my prediction. I mean, if you look back at Microsoft like we did on Tuesday, you can see they beat by 8.3%. So I don't think it's unrealistic to kind of see either similar to even higher for Apple. The question is going to be, right, how is that going to affect the stock price? Because relatively, right, even though Microsoft beat, there wasn't a huge change in the stock. So, and we even saw that from Visa, right? Seeing American Express have a huge beat. You'd expect Visa and MasterCard, which are even bigger players in the game, to have like basically been affected by those earnings announcements for American Express, but they weren't, right? They didn't have a huge effect. Overall, what you're basically seeing in the market is, right, there's just a ton of negativity around the market, and these earnings are right, they're looking backwards, right? Earnings are always basically looking at the previous quarter and how things have kind of progressed, and right now investors are focused on forward thinking. So they're focused on how are interest rates going to change, how is this going to affect a company, yada yada, basically. So really what you have to do though is look at the combination of the two, because a lot of these companies, what we've seen is they're even predicting basically future better earnings, right? In the case of Intel, right, they said that they were expecting basically a better quarter than what analysts had predict for Q1 of 2022. So really there's kind of two schools of thought there, right? Is who's going to end up being right. A lot of the market right now is basically predicting that things are going to go in the downward direction. So that sets us up for Q1, Q2, Q3 of 2022, right? If things actually play out better than people expect, then you can see a lot of run up in these stocks. So I think we're probably closer to a bottom than we were a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Obviously that's easy to say now, and I think we're a lot closer to a bottom than we are to the top. So overall, I'm a net buyer of stocks. I think that's kind of the best position to be in right now when everything's kind of has a negative light on it. I think it's a lot better to be a contrarian. I think long term you kind of have a lot more success, but obviously that's not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Make your kind of own decisions. I think this is just kind of more for information. Take it for what it is. Make your own decisions, kind of think through these things. And if you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave them down below. I can kind of guide you at least on my school of thought. And other than that, if you like the video, make sure you drop a like down below. And if you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you hit the sub button. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day.